She fulfilled the billionaire CEO's last wish before his execution. I'm dying, Eliza. 3 months, maybe less. Before I go, there's something you need to know about why I did what I did. The last time Eliza Morgan saw her husband alive, he was in handcuffs. Today, 15 years later, she stands outside his prison cell door, holding the final letter he ever wrote. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter, the familiar handwriting bringing back memories she'd spent 15 years trying to bury. Grant Prescott, once the most celebrated architect in America, now inmate #4720 known at Westlake Federal Penitentiary. I have no right to ask anything of you, his letter continued. But please, Eliza, one visit, one chance to tell you the truth. Have you ever received a letter that threatened to unravel everything you thought you knew? A message from someone who once held your heart in their hands before crushing it completely? Grant Prescott didn't just commit crimes. He left a trail of destruction that swallowed hundreds of people, including the woman he once loved. And now, facing execution, he has one last wish. Would you grant it? Or would you let the past remain buried, along with all its unanswered questions? Before we dive deeper, who among you hasn't subscribed yet? If this opening already pulled you in, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and comment what you would do if someone who hurt you begged for one final chance. And don't forget to share this story with someone who understands pain and forgiveness. Welcome back to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles, where we explore the deepest corners of the human heart. Today's story will take you on a journey through betrayal, redemption, and the extraordinary power of a final wish. So settle in, my friends. This is a story that might just change how you think about forgiveness. Eliza Morgan's life had found its rhythm. At 45, she ran the Morgan Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting children with incarcerated parents. Her downtown office overlooked a skyline that still bore the architectural influence of her ex-husband, a daily reminder she had learned to live with. Each morning, she would pause at the window, coffee in hand, and trace the distinctive silhouette of the Prescott Tower against the horizon. Its elegant curves and bold angles a testament to the genius that had once shared her bed, her dreams, her future. Miss Morgan, your 2 o'clock is here, her assistant called through the intercom. Thank you, Tara. Send them in. Eliza closed the grant proposal she'd been reviewing and stood to greet the young social worker who'd requested the meeting. This was her life now, structured, purposeful, and safely distant from the chaos Grant had caused. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of their relationship, brick by careful brick, just as Grant had once taught her was the only way to create something that would truly last. Until 3 days ago, when the letter arrived. She'd recognized his handwriting immediately on the prison-issued envelope. For a moment, she'd considered throwing it away unopened. 15 years of silence, and now he wanted to talk? But something, curiosity, perhaps, or some remnant of the woman she'd once been, made her tear it open. Perhaps it was the weight of the envelope, heavier than a simple goodbye should be. Or maybe it was the faint scent of drafting paper that still clung to it, Grant's signature scent from the days when he would sketch for hours, lost in the world of his designs. Now, as night fell and her office emptied, Eliza found herself pulling the letter from her desk drawer again, reading words that had upended her carefully constructed piece. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. What I did was unforgivable. But before I die, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you 15 years ago. Eliza closed her eyes, memories washing over her like a tide she couldn't hold back. The weight of the paper in her hands seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, as if the truth it contained had physical mass. They'd met at an industry gala, she, a promising young structural engineer, he, the architectural wonderkind everyone wanted to work with. Their connection had been immediate and electric. She'd been standing alone, studying the structural elements of the historic ballroom, when a voice behind her interrupted her thoughts. The flying buttresses are impressive, but I'm more interested in what's keeping you standing apart from the crowd. Your building won't stand without proper support, she'd told him bluntly, critiquing the design he'd been showing off to a group of investors moments earlier. Instead of being offended, Grant had laughed, a rich sound that seemed to resonate through her. Then help me build something that will last forever. For 7 years, they did just that, designing innovative structures by day, building a life together by night. Their wedding had been featured in architectural magazines, their partnership heralded as the perfect union of vision and practicality. Their future seemed as solid as the foundations they engineered together. until the day FBI agents walked into their office. The evidence was overwhelming. Grant Prescott, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, had been systematically embezzling from client accounts for years. Millions diverted into high-risk investments that eventually collapsed. Retirement funds vanished. Dreams destroyed. The man who had taught her that integrity was the most essential element in any structure had been building their life on a foundation of lies. "I don't understand," she'd whispered as they led him away. "Why would you do this?" He'd looked at her, those piercing blue eyes suddenly unreadable. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." The trial was a media sensation. The brilliant architect who'd built landmarks across the country, now revealed as a fraud. Grant pleaded guilty, but offered no explanation beyond a simple admission of wrongdoing. He accepted a 20-year sentence without contest, refusing to take the stand in his own defense, despite his attorney's urging. Eliza filed for divorce while he awaited sentencing. He signed the papers without argument, adding only a handwritten note at the bottom. "You deserve better than the ruins I've created." And now, 15 years later, he wanted to see her because he was dying. Pancreatic cancer, terminal, 3 months to live. Eliza placed the letter back in her drawer and locked it. She had built a new life from the ashes of his betrayal. The foundation helped hundreds of children each year, children suffering because of choices their parents had made, just as Grant's choices had devastated so many. Each child's story was a reminder of what had been lost, but also of what could be salvaged from the wreckage of broken trust. "Why now?" she whispered to the empty office. "Why tell me now?" The skyline outside her window had darkened, the lights of the city creating a constellation of human ambition and endeavor. Somewhere out there, families were gathering for dinner. Lovers were meeting for dates. Children were being tucked into bed, ordinary moments that had once been part of her future with Grant. Now they belonged to a life she would never know. The next morning, she called the prison. "I'd like to schedule a visit with inmate Grant Prescott," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Relationship to the prisoner?" the administrator asked. Eliza hesitated. What was she to him now? Ex-wife seemed too intimate, stranger, too distant. "I'm his ex-wife." "I see," the administrator replied, her tone shifting slightly. "You should know, Miss Morgan, that Mr. Prescott has been moved to the medical wing. His condition is deteriorating." The word sent an unexpected pang through Eliza's chest. She had imagined Grant as he was 15 years ago, commanding, vibrant, his presence filling every room. The thought of him diminished by illness was strangely unsettling. How soon can I see him? 2 days later, she found herself driving the 3 hours to Westlake Federal Penitentiary, a journey she'd never expected to make. The prison rose from the flat landscape like a concrete monument to lost freedom, stark, imposing, deliberate. Its walls seemed to absorb the morning light rather than reflect it, creating a shadow that stretched far beyond its physical boundaries. As she parked, Eliza caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. 15 years had etched fine lines around her eyes. Her once blonde hair now held strands of silver she didn't bother to color. She looked weathered, resilient. The soft curves of youth had given way to the defined edges of a woman who had been forced to become her own foundation. The security process was methodical and dehumanizing. ID check, metal detector, pat-down, personal items secured in a locker, visitor badge clipped to her blouse. Each step a reminder of the barriers, physical and emotional, that now stood between her and the man she had once promised to love until death. "Follow the yellow line to visiting room B," the guard instructed. The yellow line stretched down a sterile hallway that smelled of industrial cleaner and institutional food. Eliza's heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat. How many women had walked this same path to visit husbands, sons, fathers? How many had carried the weight of unanswered questions, just as she did now? Visiting room B was divided by a thick glass partition with stations equipped with telephones. Several other visitors were already seated, speaking to inmates on the other side. Eliza took her assigned seat and waited, hands folded tightly in her lap. The chair was uncomfortable, deliberately so, perhaps, to discourage lengthy visits. And then, he was there. Grant Prescott, once commanding, charismatic, The man whose presence filled every room now diminished in a faded prison uniform that hung loosely on his frame. His dark hair had gone completely gray, cropped close to his scalp in the prison style. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had once looked at her with such passion, remained unchanged, though now set deeper in a face hollowed by illness. He sat down across from her, his movements careful, deliberate. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other through the glass, 15 years of silence stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Grant picked up the telephone receiver on his side. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza did the same. "You came," he said simply, his voice rougher than she remembered. Eliza nodded, unable to form words immediately. The sound of his voice, once so familiar, now almost foreign, sent a cascade of memories through her. Whispered conversations in bed, passionate arguments, over design elements. His laughter echoing through their loft apartment. "I wasn't sure you would," Grant continued. His hands, those hands that had once designed buildings that transformed skylines, now fidgeting slightly on the table between them. "Neither was I," Eliza admitted, finding her voice at last. "Your letter was unexpected." "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," Grant said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But before I die, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you 15 years ago." Eliza steeled herself. "I'm listening. What I did, the embezzlement, the fraud, it wasn't just about greed or ambition." Grant's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "I was trying to save someone." Eliza felt a familiar anger rising. "Save someone? You destroyed hundreds of lives, Grant. People lost their homes, their retirement funds. Our friends, our colleagues, they trusted you." "I know," he acknowledged, pain evident in his expression. "And I've had 15 years to live with that knowledge. But there's more to the story, a part I never told anyone, not even during the trial." "Why should I believe anything you say now?" Eliza challenged, the words sharper than she'd intended. "You shouldn't," Grant replied, surprising her. "I've given you no reason to trust me, but it's the truth, and before I die, I need someone to know. I need you to know." Something in his tone, a rawness, a desperation made Eliza pause. The man before her wasn't the confident architect who had once seemed capable of reshaping the world through sheer force of will. This was someone broken, not just by illness, but by the weight of secrets carried too long. "My brother, Mason," Grant continued. "He got involved with dangerous people. They threatened to kill him if he didn't pay back what he owed. I tried to help him the legal way first, but it wasn't enough. They were going to kill him, Eliza." Eliza's breath caught. Mason, Grant's younger brother, had died in a car accident shortly after Grant's arrest. At least, that's what she'd been told. The funeral had been closed casket, the circumstances vague. "Mason's death wasn't an accident," Grant confirmed, reading her thoughts. "After I was arrested, I couldn't protect him anymore." Eliza felt the room spin slightly. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell the court?" "Because they threatened you too," Grant replied, his voice breaking. "They made it clear that if I implicated them in any way, you would be next. I couldn't risk that, not even to save myself." The revelation hit Eliza like a physical blow. For 15 years, she had believed Grant had betrayed everything they'd built together out of simple greed. She had rebuilt her life around that understanding, had channeled her pain into helping others affected by similar betrayals. Who were these people? She asked, her mind racing to process this new information. "It doesn't matter now," Grant said. "Most of them are dead or in prison for other crimes. The organization fell apart years ago." "Then why tell me now, after all this time?" "Because I'm dying," Grant said simply. "And because there's one last thing I can do to help make things right." He nodded to a guard, who approached with a folder. The guard passed it through a small opening in the partition. Eliza took it hesitantly, the weight of it surprising her. "I've been consulting on prison design from inside," Grant explained, "creating more humane environments that actually support rehabilitation. The royalties and consulting fees have accumulated over the years. I'm leaving everything to your foundation." Eliza opened the folder to find legal documents and a letter from Grant's attorney. The amount listed was substantial millions that could fund her foundation's work for years to come. "I can't accept this," she said automatically, though Her mind was already calculating how many children could be helped, how many programs expanded. "You don't have to decide now," Grant replied. "But please consider it. Not for me, but for the children your foundation helps. Children like the ones we once talked about having." The mention of children sent a sharp pain through Eliza's heart. Their plans for a family had died alongside their marriage, dreams scattered like the trust that had shattered between them. They had even chosen names: Sophia for a girl, Ethan for a boy. Now those names belonged to children who would never exist. "I don't expect forgiveness," Grant continued. "I don't deserve it. What I did hurt too many people, regardless of my reasons. But with whatever time I have left, I want to make amends, starting with the truth." Eliza studied the man before her, thinner, grayer, but with the same intensity in his gaze that had first drawn her to him 20 years ago, when they were both ambitious young professionals with dreams of changing the world through innovative design. "I should go," Eliza said, suddenly needing air, space to process what she'd learned. Grant nodded, resignation in his eyes. "Thank you for coming. It means more than you know." As Eliza stood to leave, Grant spoke again, his voice barely audible through the receiver. "I never stopped loving you, Eliza, not for a single day." She left without responding, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The carefully constructed narrative of her past, of Grant's betrayal, and her subsequent resilience had been fundamentally challenged. Now, driving away from the prison, she wasn't sure what to believe. Have you ever had a moment when everything you thought you knew suddenly shifted beneath your feet? When the villain in your story revealed a depth you never imagined? If this part of the story is already making you reflect on your own past, who hasn't subscribed yet? Hit subscribe right now. Like this video if you've ever received news that shook your entire life. Comment below, "I understand," and share this with someone who needs strength today. 3 days later, Eliza found herself in her attorney's office, still wrestling with Grant's revelation and his offer. The folder lay open on the desk between them, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Legally, there's no issue with accepting the funds," Marcus explained, adjusting his glasses. "Prescott has paid his debt to society, and the money comes from legitimate work he's done while incarcerated. The question is whether you're comfortable with it." Eliza stared out the window at the city's skyline, a skyline that still bore Grant's architectural influence. The Prescott Tower stood proudly among newer buildings, its distinctive design a reminder of what had once been possible when vision met skill. "I don't know, Marcus. For 15 years, I've defined myself in opposition to what he did. The foundation exists because of his crime." "Perhaps," Marcus acknowledged, "but it's evolved beyond that. The work you do helps real children with real needs, regardless of how it began. What would people think if they knew I accepted money from him? Does that matter more than what the money could accomplish?" Marcus countered gently, leaning forward in his chair. "Think about it, Eliza. How many more children could you help? How many more programs could you fund?" Eliza had no answer. After leaving Marcus's office, she found herself driving aimlessly, eventually stopping at a small park where she and Grant had once sketched preliminary designs for their dream home, a home they never got to build. The bench where they'd sat was still there, weathered by years of sun and rain, yet somehow still solid, just like the memories she couldn't seem to erase. She sat on the bench, watching children play on the nearby playground. Once, she and Grant had talked about having children of their own. They'd even picked out names: Sophia for a girl, Ethan for a boy. Another dream lost to his betrayal. She could almost see them now, phantom children running across the grass, their laughter carried away by the autumn breeze. But what if it hadn't been simple betrayal? What if, as he claimed, he'd been trying to protect his brother and her? Did that change anything? The harm was still done. People still lost everything. Yet the motivation mattered, didn't it? The difference between a man who destroyed lives for personal gain and one who made terrible choices to protect those he loved, wasn't that a distinction worth acknowledging? Her phone rang, displaying the prison's number. Her heart raced as she answered, a sense of foreboding washing over her. "Miss Morgan, this is Dr. Patel from the prison medical facility. Grant Prescott has been moved to the hospital wing. His condition has deteriorated rapidly. He's asking for you." Eliza closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Time was running out faster than she'd anticipated. Whatever questions remained would soon have no answers if she didn't act now. "Tell him, I'll be there tomorrow." That night, sleep eluded her. She found herself pulling out a box she'd kept hidden in her closet for 15 years, mementos from her life with Grant that she hadn't been able to discard despite her anger. Wedding photos, travel souvenirs, and sketches they'd drawn together of buildings and spaces they dreamed of creating. Each item seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the memories they contained were trying to break free from the confines of the past. At the bottom of the box lay a small velvet pouch containing her engagement ring, a unique design Grant had created himself, with interlocking bands representing their intertwined futures. He'd spent months secretly working on it, collaborating with a jeweler to bring his vision to life. She'd removed it the day of his arrest and never put it on again, yet she couldn't bring herself to sell it or throw it away. It remained, like so many things between them, unresolved. Morning found her exhausted but resolved. She dressed carefully, placing the ring in her pocket not to wear, but as a reminder of what had once been and what had been lost. The weight of it against her thigh was both comfort and burden, much like the memories she carried. The prison hospital wing was quieter than the visiting room, with the antiseptic smell common to all medical facilities. Grant looked significantly worse than he had just days before. His skin sallow, his breathing labored. The cancer was working quickly, consuming him from the inside out, a cruel irony for a man who had once built structures designed to withstand the ravages of time. No glass partitions separated them this time. Grant lay in a hospital bed, an IV in his arm, monitoring equipment beeping softly beside him. A guard stood discreetly by the door, a reminder that despite his condition, Grant was still a prisoner serving his sentence. His eyes brightened slightly when he saw her. "You came back." "I did," Eliza confirmed, taking the seat beside his bed. The chair was more comfortable than the one in the visiting room, a small mercy in this sterile place. "I've been thinking about what you told me." And his voice was weaker now, each word seeming to cost him energy he couldn't spare. "I'm still processing it," she admitted. 15 years of believing one truth doesn't change overnight. Grant nodded weakly. "I understand. But," Eliza continued, "I've decided to accept your offer for the foundation, not for you or for me, but for the children we help." Relief washed over Grant's features, softening the hard edges that pain and illness had carved into his face. "Thank you." A comfortable silence settled between them, different from the tense atmosphere of their previous meeting. Finally, Grant spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you remember the Cliffside Project? The community center we designed for that struggling neighborhood?" Eliza smiled despite herself. The Cliffside Community Center had been one of their most meaningful collaborations, a building designed to provide educational resources, healthcare, and social services to an underserved community. They had worked on it nights and weekends, pouring their hearts into creating a space that would truly serve the people who needed it most. Of course, it was beautiful. The center had been under construction when Grant was arrested. After the scandal, funding had dried up, and the project had been abandoned, its half-finished skeleton a monument to broken promises. "It was never finished," Grant said, regret evident in his voice. "Another casualty of my actions." "Actually," Eliza corrected him, "it was completed 3 years ago." Grant's eyes widened in surprise, a spark of their old intensity returning. "What?" "After your arrest, when everything fell apart. I couldn't bear to see it abandoned," Eliza explained. "The foundation raised the funds to complete it. It's been serving the community ever since." Tears formed in Grant's eyes. "You finished it? Our design?" "With some modifications," Eliza acknowledged. "But yes, the essence of what we created together is there. The central atrium still has that floating staircase you insisted on, despite the engineering challenges." She smiled faintly at the memory of their heated debates over that particular feature. "I'd like to see it," Grant whispered. "Even just a picture." Eliza hesitated, then pulled out her phone, scrolling through her photos until she found images of the completed center. She held the phone where Grant could see, watching as emotion overtook him. His hands trembled as he took the phone, swiping through the images with reverent care. "It's more beautiful than I imagined," he said, voice breaking. "You made it happen, even after everything I did." "The design was good," Eliza said simply. "The community deserved it." Grant's hand trembled as he reached for hers. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza allowed the contact. His fingers were cold, the skin paper-thin, so different from the strong, sure hands that had once sketched buildings that touched the sky. "I have a request," he said. "My last wish, you could say." Eliza tensed slightly. "What is it?" "There's a journal in my cell, my designs for prison reform, ideas that could make a difference. Would you make sure they reach people who can implement them? Not for my legacy, but because they could help." The request surprised her. She had expected something more personal, perhaps even something unreasonable. Instead, his final wish was to ensure his work might help others, might create spaces that fostered healing rather than punishment. It was so quintessentially Grant, this belief in the power of design to transform lives. "I will," she promised. Grant's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "There's something else in the journal. Letters I wrote to you over the years, letters I never sent. You don't have to read them, but they're there." Eliza felt tears threatening. "Grant, I know," he interrupted gently. "Too little, too late. But I needed you to know that not a day went by when I didn't regret the pain I caused you." A nurse entered, checking Grant's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "He needs to rest now," she told Eliza, kindly but firmly. Eliza nodded, standing to leave. On impulse, she reached into her pocket and placed the engagement ring on the table beside Grant's bed. "I kept it," she said simply. "All these years," Grant stared at the ring, emotion overwhelming him. "Eliza, Rest," she said, cutting him off gently. "I'll come back tomorrow." But Grant Prescott was holding on to one final truth. A truth he couldn't bring himself to speak that day. A secret that would change everything Eliza thought she knew about justice, betrayal, and the price of protection. Before we reveal the secret he took to his grave, who has not subscribed yet? Hit subscribe so you don't miss powerful twists like this. Like this video if you're deep in the story. Comment, "I'm still watching." And share this with someone who loves emotional storytelling. The call came at 3 a.m. Grant had slipped away peacefully in his sleep. Eliza sat in the darkness of her bedroom, the news settling around her like a heavy blanket. The complex tangle of emotions, grief, anger, regret, and a strange sense of peace kept her company until dawn broke. "I'm sorry, Miss Morgan," Dr. Patel had said over the phone. He went quickly without pain. The nurse said he was holding something in his hand when they found him. The ring, the symbol of promises made and broken, of a future that never came to be. In his final moments, Grant had held on to this tangible reminder of what they had once meant to each other. The thought pierced Eliza's heart with unexpected sharpness. Later that week, she sat in her office at the foundation, Grant's journal open before her. A prison guard had delivered it personally, along with Grant's few personal effects. The journal was leather-bound, its pages filled with his distinctive architectural sketches and precise handwriting. Even in prison, even facing death, Grant had continued to create to imagine spaces that might foster healing and growth. His prison reform designs were innovative and compassionate, reflecting a deep understanding of how environment affects behavior and rehabilitation. She had already contacted several criminal justice reform organizations who had expressed interest in his concepts. There was something poetically just about the idea that Grant's final work might help transform the very system that had confined him. The letters, as he'd mentioned, were tucked in the back of the journal, 15 years of thoughts, regrets, and love expressed in his distinctive handwriting. Eliza had read only the first one so far, dated a week after his incarceration began. "My dearest Eliza, the hardest part of each day is waking up and remembering that you are no longer beside me and knowing that I am the reason why. The second hardest part is falling asleep without telling you goodnight. Everything in between is just punishment I deserve. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that protecting you was the one right choice I made in a sea of wrong ones. Forever yours, Grant." A knock at her office door interrupted her reading. Her assistant, Tara, entered with a legal envelope. "This just arrived from Grant Prescott's attorney," Tara explained, placing it on the desk. The messenger said it was to be delivered immediately upon Mr. Prescott's passing. Eliza opened it to find a deed and architectural plans. The deed was for a piece of land, the same land where she and Grant had once planned to build their dream home. The plans were new designs, dated just months ago, For a facility on that land, a residential center for children transitioning out of foster care. A note in Grant's handwriting accompanied the plans. For the home we never built, and the family we never had, may it shelter others who need it most. Tears blurred Eliza's vision as she studied the designs. They were beautiful, thoughtful spaces, designed to provide both security and independence, community and privacy. His final gift was not just the land or the money, but this vision, a way to transform their lost dreams into something meaningful for others. Even facing death, Grant had continued to believe in the power of architecture, to shape lives, to create possibilities where none seemed to exist. "Tara," Eliza called, wiping her eyes, "set up a meeting with the board. I have a proposal to discuss." The board meeting was contentious. Several members expressed concern about accepting such a significant gift from Grant Prescott, whose name was still associated with one of the largest financial scandals in recent history. The optics could be problematic, argued Richard Harmon, the foundation's most conservative member. "We've built our reputation on integrity. Accepting this could taint that." "With all due respect," Eliza countered, "this isn't about Grant Prescott's reputation, or even our own. It's about the children we serve. This center could help hundreds of young people transition successfully to adulthood." "And the source of the funding?" pressed Harmon. "Is legitimate," Eliza replied firmly. "Grant designed prison facilities while incarcerated. The royalties and consulting fees were earned legally and ethically. But the land was purchased before his crimes," Eliza interrupted. "It's been sitting unused for 15 years. Now, it can serve a purpose." In the end, the board voted to accept the gift, with the stipulation that the facility be named the Prescott Morgan Youth Center, acknowledging both Grant's contribution and Eliza's leadership. It was a compromise Eliza could live with, a way to honor the good that remained in Grant's legacy while not erasing the harm his actions had caused. 2 months later, Eliza stood on that land, watching as construction crews broke ground on what would become the Prescott Morgan Youth Center. The foundation board had unanimously approved the project, recognizing both its alignment with their mission and the poetic justice of its creation. "Ms. Morgan," called the project manager, approaching with blueprints in hand, "we need your approval on the final placement of the East Wing." As Eliza reviewed the plans, she felt a sense of déjà vu. Years ago, she and Grant had stood on this same spot, imagining their future home. They had talked about a nursery with a window seat where they could read to their children, a kitchen large enough for family gatherings, a studio where they could work together on new designs. Now, a different kind of home would rise here, one that would shelter young people in need of stability and support. As the first ceremonial shovelful of earth was turned, Eliza felt a sense of closure begin to take root alongside the new beginning represented by the center. Grant's betrayal had shattered her world 15 years ago, but his final acts had offered a different kind of truth, one that didn't erase the past but provided context that allowed her to see it differently. The center would stand as testament not to what they had lost, but to what could still be created from the ruins, second chances, new beginnings, and the possibility that even the most broken things might serve as foundation for something beautiful and enduring. As she watched the sunset over what would become a home for children who needed one, Eliza finally understood that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past or excusing it. It was about creating a future not defined by it. Grant's last wish had given her that opportunity, and she intended to honor it with every brick laid and every life touched by the center that would bear both their names. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the buildings or even the foundation. It was about the recognition that redemption comes in many forms, and sometimes the most meaningful amends are made not through words, but through creating something that outlasts our mistakes, something that helps others find their way home. Do you believe that beauty can rise from the ashes of our greatest failures? That our worst mistakes might somehow become the foundation for our most meaningful contributions? If you believe that beauty can come from broken places, who among you still hasn't subscribed? Tap subscribe, like this video, comment, "Hope is real," and share this with someone rebuilding their life. 6 months after breaking ground, Eliza stood in what would become the central courtyard of the Prescott Morgan Youth Center. Construction had progressed rapidly, the skeleton of Grant's vision taking physical form around her. Floor-to-ceiling windows were being installed in the communal spaces, designed to flood the interior with natural light, a deliberate contrast to the institutional darkness of prison. The building seemed to be reaching toward the sky, embracing the future, while remaining firmly grounded in purpose. "Miss Morgan?" The site foreman approached, hard hat in hand. "We found something during the excavation for the East Wing Foundation." He handed her a small, tarnished metal box. It was buried about 3 feet down. "Has your name on it." Eliza examined the box, her heart racing when she recognized Grant's handwriting etched into the metal. For Eliza, when the time is right. The box felt heavy in her hands, weighted with possibilities and memories yet to be uncovered. "Thank you," she managed, clutching the box tightly. Alone in her car, Eliza carefully pried open the rusted lid. Inside lay a sealed envelope and a small architectural model, a perfect miniature of the home they had once planned to build together. The detail was exquisite, clearly crafted by Grant's skilled hands during their early years together. Every element they had dreamed of was there in miniature: the curved staircase, the wall of windows facing the sunrise, even the tiny swing set in the backyard where their phantom children would have played. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. "My dearest Eliza, if you're reading this, you've decided to build something on our land. I buried this box the weekend after we purchased the property, when our future seemed limitless and certain. I don't know what circumstances have brought you back here, or how many years have passed, but I wanted some piece of our original dream to remain in this soil, regardless of what happens. Whatever stands on this land now, I hope it brings you the joy we once imagined finding here together. All my love, Grant." The letter was dated 16 years ago, just months before his arrest. Eliza sat motionless, tears streaming down her face as she realized Grant had created this time capsule during their happiest period, never imagining the tragedy that would soon unfold. He had planted this seed of memory in the soil where they planned to build their life, not knowing that life would take a drastically different course. The miniature house represented everything they had lost, the family they'd planned, the life they'd envisioned. Yet here she sat, overseeing the construction of something entirely different, but no less meaningful. The irony wasn't lost on her, that the land meant for their private happiness would now serve a greater purpose, offering shelter to young people who had never known the stability of a true home. A land once filled with broken memories, now holding new possibilities. That evening, Eliza made a decision. She contacted Adrian Lockwood, the architect overseeing the youth center construction, and requested a modification to the plans. The central courtyard would now include a small memorial garden, not labeled as such, but designed around elements from the miniature house model. A private tribute that most would never recognize, but that honored the foundation upon which this new beginning was built. "It's an unusual request," Adrian noted, studying the miniature house with professional interest. "But I think we can incorporate these elements without disrupting the overall design. The curved bench here could echo this roofline, and these plantings could mirror the layout of the original floor plan." "Thank you," Eliza said. "It's important to me." Adrian nodded, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected understanding. The best designs always honor what came before, even as they create something new. As the center neared completion, Eliza immersed herself in preparations for its opening. Hiring staff, developing programs, and securing ongoing funding consumed her days. The work provided welcome distraction from the emotional complexity of the project, and from the remaining letters in Grant's journal, which she had been reading gradually, one per week. Each letter revealed more of Grant's prison journey, his initial despair, his slow acceptance of responsibility, and eventually his determination to create meaning from his punishment. The Grant in these letters was neither the man she had married nor the criminal who had betrayed her, but someone more complex, broken, but striving for redemption in the only ways available to him. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Eliza was reviewing applications for the center's director position when her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "There's a Miss Prescott here to see you. Says she's Grant Prescott's sister." Eliza froze. She hadn't known Grant had a sister. In all their years together, he had only ever spoken of his brother Mason. The revelation that there was another Prescott sibling she'd never heard of sent a chill down her spine. What other secrets had Grant kept from her? "Send her in," Eliza said, composing herself. The woman who entered was in her early 40s, with Grant's distinctive blue eyes and determined jawline. She carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had once characterized her brother. "Miss Morgan, I'm Olivia Prescott." She extended her hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "I didn't know Grant had a sister," Eliza said, gesturing for Olivia to sit. Half-sister, actually. Different mothers. Olivia's expression softened. We reconnected after his incarceration. I'd been living abroad for many years. I see. Eliza studied the woman carefully. What can I do for you, Miss Prescott? I've been following news of the youth center, Olivia explained. When I saw it was being built on land Grant once owned, and that you were behind it, I wanted to meet you. End quote. How did you know about the land? Eliza asked, suspicion edging into her voice. Grant and I corresponded regularly during his final years. He mentioned his plans to leave it to you. Olivia hesitated. He spoke of you often, Miss Morgan, with great regret, but also with great pride in what you've accomplished. Eliza felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Did he tell you everything about why he committed his crimes? Olivia nodded solemnly. About Mason, yes. Our brother was troubled from a young age. Grant always felt responsible for him, especially after our father died. I only learned the truth days before Grant's death, Eliza admitted. He wanted to protect you, Olivia said simply. It was his way taking on burdens alone, shielding others from consequences. A noble but flawed approach, Eliza observed. Indeed. Olivia smiled sadly. The Prescott family's specialty, good intentions, catastrophic execution. Despite herself, Eliza laughed. The description was painfully accurate, capturing the essence of the man she had loved and lost in a single phrase. I have something for you, Olivia continued, reaching into her bag. She withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with geometric patterns. Grant made this during a prison woodworking program. He asked me to give it to you after the center was completed, but I thought you might want it now. Eliza accepted the box, running her fingers over the precise carving's architectural elements she recognized from their shared designs. Even in prison, Grant had continued to speak the language of structure and form, creating beauty from the limited materials available to him. Thank you, she said softly. There's something else, Olivia added. I'm an educator, a professor of social work at State University. I'd like to offer my services to the center, perhaps developing programs or training staff. Pro bono, of course. Eliza studied Grant's sister with new interest. Why? Because my brother's mistakes destroyed lives, including yours, Olivia replied candidly. But his final act, this center has the potential to save some. I'd like to be part of that redemption, if you'll allow it. In Olivia's earnest expression, Eliza saw echoes of the Grant she had first fallen in love with, the idealistic young architect, determined to create spaces that improved lives, before ambition and fear had corrupted his choices. We could use someone with your expertise, Eliza acknowledged. I'll have my assistant schedule a proper meeting to discuss possibilities. After Olivia left, Eliza opened the wooden box. Inside lay a simple silver key and a note in Grant's handwriting. For the door to a home I'll never see. May it open possibilities I cannot imagine. The key was small and ornate, clearly not designed for any standard lock. Eliza turned it over in her palm, wondering what door it might open, what secrets it might unlock. Another mystery from a man who had taken so many to his grave. Have you ever received a gift that posed more questions than it answered? A key without a lock? A map without a destination? If you're still here, you clearly love stories with hidden keys and deeper meanings. So, who hasn't subscribed yet? Hit subscribe, like this video, comment what you think the silver key symbolizes, and share the story with someone who loves mysteries. The Prescott Morgan Youth Center opened on a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after Grant's death. The timing wasn't coincidental. Eliza had insisted on it, a private acknowledgement of the center's complex origins. The facility was everything Grant's designs had promised. Warm, welcoming spaces that balanced community and privacy, security and freedom. The first group of residents, 10 young adults, transitioning from foster care, had moved in the previous week, their cautious optimism gradually giving way to genuine excitement as they claimed rooms of their own, many for the first time in their lives. For the opening ceremony, Eliza had invited key foundation donors, community leaders, and the team that had brought the center to life. Olivia Prescott stood quietly at the back, her contribution to the center's educational programs already proving invaluable. As Eliza prepared to address the gathered crowd, She found herself thinking of Grant's journal specifically, the final letter she had read just that morning. My dearest Eliza, the doctor says I have weeks, perhaps days. I find I'm not afraid of dying, only of leaving with things between us unresolved. But perhaps some things must remain unresolved, some debts can never be fully repaid. I hope that in time, you might think of me not as the man who betrayed you, nor as the idealized husband of our early years, but as someone who loved imperfectly, failed catastrophically, but tried in the end to create something meaningful from the wreckage. Whatever you decide to do with the land, the money, my designs, know that I trust your judgment completely. You always saw more clearly than I did what truly matters. With love, until the end, Grant. Standing at the podium now, looking out at the faces of those gathered to celebrate this new beginning, Eliza felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for 15 years. The Prescott Morgan Youth Center, she began, represents many things to many people. To our residents, it's a safe transition to independence. To our community, it's a resource and a promise. To our donors, it's an investment in young lives. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But at its foundation, this center is about transformation, about how our darkest moments don't have to define us, about how what we build after failure can be more meaningful than what we might have created without it. Her gaze swept across the courtyard, lingering briefly on the memorial garden with its subtle echoes of a dream home never built. Someone once told me that architecture isn't just about creating spaces, but about creating possibilities. Today, we open not just a building, but a world of possibilities for young people who deserve every chance to define their own futures. As applause filled the courtyard, Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The journey from betrayal to this moment had been long and painful, filled with anger, grief, and eventually, a complicated kind of forgiveness. Not the neat, clean forgiveness of fairy tales, but the messy, real-world version that acknowledges harm while creating space for something new to grow from the ruins. Grant's last wish had been for redemption, not for himself, but for the damage he had caused. In honoring that wish, Eliza had found her own form of healing, transforming a painful past into a purposeful future. Later, after the guests had departed and the new residents had returned to their rooms, Eliza stood alone in the courtyard. The silver key from Grant's wooden box had remained a mystery until today, when she discovered it fit a small lockbox built into the memorial garden's central feature. A stone bench, inscribed with words from Grant's final design. Notes: every space we create holds the promise of what might happen within it. Inside the lockbox, she found a single envelope containing architectural sketches, Grant's original concepts for their dream home, drawn in the early days of their relationship. On the final page, he had written, "Dreams change. What matters is that we keep dreaming." As twilight settled over the center, Eliza sat on the bench, holding the sketches and watching lights come on in the residents' windows. Young people moving about in spaces designed to nurture their potential, to help them overcome pasts not of their making, and create futures of their own design. In the end, Grant's legacy wasn't the buildings he had created or the crimes he had committed, but this moment, this transformation of loss into possibility. And perhaps, Eliza reflected, that was true for her as well. Her own legacy wouldn't be defined by being the woman Grant Prescott had betrayed, but by what she had built from that betrayal. As darkness fell completely, Eliza carefully returned the sketches to the lockbox, locked it with the silver key, and walked toward the center's main entrance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, residents to counsel, programs to refine, lives to impact. The past would always be there, its lessons embedded in the very foundation of what she had built. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Eliza looked forward without the weight of what might have been, embracing instead the promise of what still could be. 1 year after the center's opening, Eliza sat in her office reviewing the annual impact report. The statistics were encouraging. All 10 original residents remained in the program, with 8 now employed and 2 attending community college. The waiting list for new applicants had grown to over 30 names, evidence of both the center's success and the overwhelming need for such services. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Olivia Prescott entered, carrying a thick folder. "The curriculum for the financial literacy program is ready for your review," she said, placing the folder on Eliza's desk. Over the past year, Olivia had become an invaluable part of the center's team, her academic expertise complementing Eliza's practical approach. "Thank you," Eliza replied, gesturing for Olivia to sit. How are the residents responding to your mentorship program? Better than expected, Olivia smiled. Especially Darius, he's showing real leadership potential. Darius had been among the first residents, a quiet 18-year-old who had aged out of foster care after 13 placements in 7 years. His transformation over the past year had been remarkable, from a withdrawn young man who barely made eye contact to someone who now helped newer residents navigate the transition. He reminds me of Grant sometimes, Olivia added softly. That same intensity when he's focused on something that matters to him. The comparison startled Eliza, though she couldn't deny its accuracy. I've noticed that too, she admitted. Their conversation was interrupted by Eliza's assistant announcing an unexpected visitor, Marcus Whitfield, her attorney. Marcus? Is everything all right? Eliza asked as he entered, briefcase in hand. That depends on your perspective, Marcus replied cryptically. I've just received some rather surprising information regarding Grant Prescott's case. Eliza felt her chest tighten. What kind of information? Marcus glanced at Olivia questioningly. It's fine, Eliza assured him. Olivia is Grant's sister. Marcus nodded, opening his briefcase. The federal prosecutor's office contacted me this morning. They've been investigating a major financial crimes network for several years. Last week, they arrested a man named Victor Mercer. The name meant nothing to Eliza. But beside her, Olivia inhaled sharply. You know him? Eliza asked. Only by reputation, Olivia replied, her voice strained. He was mentioned in some of Grant's letters to me. He was connected to the people threatening Mason. Marcus continued. Mercer has agreed to provide information on numerous cases in exchange for consideration in his sentencing. One of those cases is Grant's. He removed several documents from his briefcase. According to Mercer's testimony, Grant was indeed coerced into his financial crimes. Mercer has provided evidence that Grant's brother was being threatened and that Grant himself was being blackmailed. Eliza stared at the documents, her mind racing. Are you saying Grant was telling the truth? That everything he told me before he died was accurate? It appears so. Marcus confirmed. The prosecutor's office is reviewing the case. There's a possibility they might posthumously modify certain aspects of Grant's conviction in light of this new evidence. Would that change anything legally? Eliza asked, struggling to process the implications. Regarding his estate or the foundation's assets? No, Marcus assured her. The financial arrangements remain valid regardless. This is more a matter of historical record. Historical record, such a clinical term for what amounted to Grant's legacy, the story that would be told about him, the man he would be remembered as. For 15 years, he had been the villain in a straightforward narrative of greed and betrayal. Now, that narrative was being rewritten, complicated by evidence of coercion and sacrifice. I need some time to think about this, Eliza said finally. After Marcus departed, Eliza and Olivia sat in silence, both contemplating the revelation. Did you believe him? Eliza asked eventually. When he told you about being coerced? Yes, Olivia answered without hesitation. But I'm his sister. My belief didn't change what happened to the people who lost everything because of his actions. No, Eliza agreed. It doesn't. What will you do with this information? Olivia asked. Eliza gazed out her window at the center's courtyard, where several residents were gathered around an outdoor table, laughing as they shared a meal. The scene was exactly what she and Grant had envisioned when designing the space, a place where healing could happen through community. I don't know yet, she admitted. The truth is complicated. Grant made choices, terrible choices, that hurt people, regardless of his reasons. But knowing those reasons weren't simply greed or ambition, but it matters. I'm just not sure how. Have the hardest truths in your life been the ones that forced you to reconsider everything you thought you knew? If this truth hit you hard, who has not subscribed yet? Go ahead and subscribe right now. Like if this revelation shocked you, comment, "Justice matters," and share with someone who needs to hear this. That evening, Eliza found herself drawn to the memorial garden. Sitting on the stone bench, she unlocked the small compartment with Grant's silver key and removed the architectural sketches she had placed there a year earlier. Among them, she now noticed a sketch she had overlooked before a detailed drawing of the courtyard where she now sat, complete with the memorial garden and stone bench. Grant had envisioned this space exactly as it now existed. down to the specific plants and the inscription on the bench. He had known she would build something here, known she would find a way to honor what they had lost while creating something new. Even from prison, even facing death, he had understood her well enough to anticipate not just what she would do, but how she would do it. The realization brought fresh tears. Grant had understood her in ways she had forgotten during the years of anger and separation. He had anticipated not just her pain, but her resilience, her capacity to transform that pain into purpose. The prosecutor's revelation changed nothing about the harm Grant's actions had caused. Yet it confirmed what she had begun to suspect during their final meetings, that the man she had loved was neither the perfect partner of her early memories nor the heartless criminal of her bitter years, but someone far more human, flawed, frightened, and ultimately trying to protect those he loved, however misguided his methods. As twilight deepened around her, Eliza made a decision. The truth of Grant's story deserved to be known, not to excuse his actions, but to complete the picture, to acknowledge the complexity that existed in even the most seemingly straightforward narratives of guilt and innocence. 3 months later, Eliza stood before a small gathering in the center's community room. The audience included center residents, staff, board members, and a handful of journalists invited for the occasion. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today marks an important milestone for the Prescott Morgan Youth Center. Thanks to a generous anonymous donation, we're announcing the establishment of the Second Chance Scholarship Fund, which will provide educational opportunities for our residents and others aging out of foster care throughout the state." Applause filled the room. Eliza waited for it to subside before continuing. "I've also asked you here today to share some news regarding Grant Prescott, whose architectural vision shaped this center. Recent evidence has confirmed that Mr. Provided Eminer, Prescott's crimes, while still serious and harmful, were committed under duress and coercion. This information doesn't erase the damage caused, but it does provide important context." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I first learned of this evidence, I struggled with how to respond. Should it change how we view Grant's legacy? Does motivation matter when the outcome remains the same? I've concluded that the full truth matters not to excuse, but to understand." Eliza gestured to the large covered object beside her. "In that spirit, I'm unveiling a new installation for our lobby." She removed the covering to reveal a beautiful glass and metal sculpture, an abstract representation of a building rising from broken fragments. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "From broken dreams, new foundations rise. The Prescott Morgan Youth Center. Designed by Grant Prescott, 1975 to 2024. Established by Eliza Morgan. In recognition that redemption begins with truth. This center exists because of a complicated history," Eliza continued. "It was born from mistakes, regrets, and ultimately, a desire to create meaning from failure. That's a message our residents understand intimately, that our worst moments don't have to define us, that what matters most is what we build from the ruins." After the ceremony, as guests mingled and explored the center, Darius approached Eliza hesitantly. "Miss Morgan, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Darius. This Grant guy, the one who designed this place, you were married to him, right?" Eliza nodded, surprised by the question. "And he did something bad, went to prison, but then tried to make it right before he died?" "That's a simplified version. But yes," Eliza confirmed. Darius seemed to consider this carefully. "So he got a second chance, kind of. Not to fix everything, but to do something good at the end." "Yes," Eliza said softly. "He did." "That's what you're giving us here," Darius said, gesturing around the center. "A second chance. Not to erase what happened before, but to build something different going forward." The insight from this young man, who had experienced more hardship in 18 years than most people face in a lifetime, struck Eliza deeply. "That's exactly what we're trying to do," she agreed. Darius nodded, satisfied. "I'm applying to the architectural program at community college. Miss Prescott is helping me with the application. I want to design places like this someday." As he walked away, Eliza felt a profound sense of completion. The circle that had begun with Grant's crimes and continued through his final acts of restitution had expanded to include this young man's future, a future that might never have been possible without the center. Later that evening, after all the guests had departed, Eliza returned to her office to find Olivia waiting. "Powerful ceremony," Olivia commented. Grant would have been proud. I hope so, Eliza replied, though I didn't do it for him. I know, Olivia smiled. You did it because it was true. The whole truth, not just the convenient parts. Eliza nodded, gathering her belongings to leave. Will you join me for dinner? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant nearby, Eliza shared her latest idea. Expanding the center's model to other locations, creating a network of transition homes for youth aging out of foster care. The foundation has the resources, she explained, and the need is overwhelming, but I can't do it alone. You want my help? Olivia surmised. I want a partner, Eliza corrected. Someone who shares the vision and has the expertise to help realize it. The educational components you've developed here have been transformative. Imagine implementing those across multiple centers. Olivia considered the proposal thoughtfully. It would mean leaving my university position. It would, Eliza acknowledged, but I think the impact would be worth it. Using Grant's money to help young people find their way, Olivia mused. There's a certain poetry to that. It's not just Grant's money anymore, Eliza pointed out. The foundation has grown beyond its origins. This is about creating something new together. Olivia raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, then, and to the complicated paths that lead us to them. As they clinked glasses, Eliza felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The journey that had begun with betrayal and loss had led her here to purpose, to impact, and to an unexpected friendship with the sister of the man who had once broken her heart. Life rarely offered neat resolutions or perfect justice. Instead, it provided opportunities to create meaning from chaos, to build something valuable from the wreckage of what was lost. Grant had understood that in his final days. Now, Eliza was living it. 5 years later, Eliza stood on a hillside overlooking the original Prescott Morgan Youth Center and its 3 newer siblings, identical facilities built in neighboring counties, each serving 20 young adults transitioning from foster care to independence. Beside her stood Olivia, now the educational director for all 4 centers, and Darius, who had recently graduated with his architectural degree and joined the foundation as a junior designer. Hard to believe it all started with one building, Darius remarked, surveying the campus that had grown around the original center. Educational facilities, workshops, and community spaces that served not just residents, but the surrounding neighborhoods. It started with an idea, Eliza corrected gently. The belief that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. The expansion had exceeded even her ambitious vision. The Prescott Morgan model was now being studied and replicated in other states, its success rates drawing attention from policymakers and philanthropists nationwide. More meaningful to Eliza, however, were the individual stories, the hundreds of young people who had found stability, support, and opportunity within these walls. Young people like Darius, whose architectural talent might never have been discovered without the center's resources. The new facility breaks ground next month, Olivia reminded them. The board approved the final designs yesterday. The 5th center would be the largest yet, incorporating all they had learned from the previous 4. Darius had contributed significantly to its design, bringing the perspective of someone who had once been a resident himself. As they walked back toward the main building, Eliza found herself thinking of Grant's final letter, his hope that she might create something meaningful from the wreckage of their shared past. He could never have imagined the scope of what that hope would inspire. That evening, alone in her office, Eliza opened the wooden box Olivia had given her years ago. Inside, alongside Grant's silver key, she now kept mementos of the center's milestones, photographs of groundbreaking ceremonies, newspaper clippings about successful graduates, thank you notes from residents whose lives had been transformed. Together, these items told a story not just of redemption, but of evolution, how pain could become purpose, how endings could become beginnings, how the worst mistakes could, with time and intention, lead to the most meaningful contributions. Grant's last wish had been for forgiveness he didn't believe he deserved. What he had received instead was something more complex and perhaps more valuable. The opportunity for his failures to seed something beautiful and enduring. As Eliza closed the box, she thought of something Darius had said earlier that day while reviewing plans for the new center. Every building tells a story about the people who designed it and the people it's designed for. The story of the Prescott Morgan Centers was still being written. one life at a time. It wasn't a simple story of villains redeemed or wrongs righted, but a complex narrative about human frailty and resilience, about how the truth, however painful, could become foundation rather than rubble. Outside her window, lights glowed warmly in the residence quarters. Young people preparing for futures they could now imagine, in spaces designed to nurture possibility. This was Grant's true legacy, not the buildings themselves, but the lives unfolding within them. And it had become Eliza's legacy too, not as victim or avenger, but as architect of transformation. The past could not be changed, but the future that was still being designed, one conscious choice at a time. 10 years after Grant's death, the Prescott Morgan Foundation had grown into one of the most respected organizations in the field of youth transition services. With 7 centers operating across the state and consultation programs helping similar facilities develop nationwide, Eliza found herself increasingly in the public eye, speaking at conferences, advising policymakers, and advocating for systemic changes to better support vulnerable young adults. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day the first center had opened, Eliza stood before a gathering at State University's School of Social Work. The occasion was the dedication of the Grant Prescott Memorial Lecture Series on Ethical Leadership and Redemptive Justice, a program funded jointly by the Foundation and the university. It may seem strange, Eliza began, addressing the assembled faculty, students, and community members, to name a lecture series on ethics after someone convicted of financial crimes. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the audience. But the most valuable lessons about ethics rarely come from those who have never faced moral challenges. They come from understanding how and why people fail, and what they do in the aftermath of that failure. Eliza paused, surveying the faces before her. Among them sat Olivia, now the Foundation's executive director; Darius, whose architectural firm specialized in designing spaces for vulnerable populations; and several graduates of the Prescott Morgan Centers, some now professionals in social services themselves. Grant Prescott made catastrophic mistakes, Eliza continued, mistakes that harmed many people, including himself. What makes his story worth studying isn't the crime, but what came after the recognition that while we cannot undo harm once inflicted, we can choose how we respond to our failures. After the ceremony, as attendees mingled at the reception, a young woman approached Eliza tentatively. "Miss Morgan, I'm Professor Winter's graduate assistant. There's someone who'd like to meet you, if you have a moment." Eliza followed the student to a quiet corner of the reception hall, where an elderly man sat in a wheelchair. Something about his posture, the dignified way he held himself despite his frailty, struck her as familiar. "Miss Morgan," the man said, his voice thin but clear, "thank you for agreeing to speak with me. My name is Harold Klein." The name registered immediately. Harold Klein had been the lead prosecutor in Grant's case 15 years ago. "Mr. Klein," Eliza acknowledged, taking the seat beside him. "This is unexpected." "I imagine so," he agreed with a small smile. "I've followed your work with the Foundation over the years. Quite remarkable what you've built." "Thank you," Eliza replied cautiously, unsure of his purpose. "I wanted to tell you something," Klein continued. "Something I've never shared publicly. When I was building the case against your husband, I knew there were extenuating circumstances. I knew about the threats against his brother." Eliza stiffened. "You knew? And you still pursued the maximum charges?" Klein nodded, regret evident in his expression. It was a different time. Financial crimes were devastating the economy. The public wanted blood. My superiors wanted high-profile convictions. He sighed heavily. "I convinced myself I was serving justice. But in truth, I was serving my career." "Why are you telling me this now?" Eliza asked, struggling to contain her anger. "Because I'm dying," Klein replied simply. "Pancreatic cancer, the same as your husband, and because I've watched what you've created from the ashes of that case." The centers, the lives changed. He gestured toward the room where the lecture series had just been dedicated. "You've built something meaningful from injustice. It's humbling." Eliza sat in stunned silence, absorbing this revelation. After all these years, to learn that the prosecutor had known the truth and proceeded anyway, it reopened wounds she had thought long healed. "I don't expect forgiveness," Klein added softly, echoing Grant's words from so long ago. "I just wanted you to know the truth. All of it." Later that evening, Eliza sat alone in her hotel room, Klein's confession replaying in her mind. She had built her post-Grant life on the gradual acceptance that justice was imperfect, that redemption was possible even after terrible mistakes. But Klein's revelation challenged her hard-won peace. If the prosecutor had shown mercy, acknowledged the coercion, Grant might have received a lighter sentence. He might still be alive. They might have had a chance to rebuild together, rather than through the proxy of the foundation. The thought threatened to overwhelm her with fresh grief and anger. Yet as the initial shock subsided, Eliza recognized something unexpected. The revelation changed nothing about what she had built. The centers existed. Lives had been transformed. Her own journey from victim to architect of change remained valid. The truth, however painful, was simply another piece of the complex mosaic that had become her life's work. Have you ever discovered a truth that came too late to change the past, but still somehow transformed your understanding of everything that followed? If this journey moved you, who hasn't subscribed yet? Don't watch this whole story and leave without joining this community. Hit subscribe, like this video, comment your favorite moment, and share this story with someone who believes in redemption. Not just your story, but the stories of countless others? The blueprint is in your hands now. The foundation has been laid. What will you build? If this story has moved you, please don't leave without subscribing to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles. Each week, we explore the architecture of the human heart, its capacity for both devastating collapse and remarkable reconstruction. Like this video if it touched you. Share it with someone who needs its message, and comment below with your own story of rebuilding. Until our paths cross again, may you find beauty in the broken places, purpose in the pain, and the courage to keep designing the life you want to live, even when the original plans have changed. This is Mr. Whitman, reminding you that sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from the ruins of what once was. As I reflect on Eliza's journey one last time, I'm struck by something we haven't fully explored, the profound courage it takes to revisit our most painful chapters. When Grant's letter arrived after 15 years of silence, Eliza could have simply thrown it away. She could have remained safely within the narrative she'd constructed that he was simply a greedy man who had betrayed everyone who trusted him. That would have been easier, cleaner, less complicated. But she didn't. Despite every reason to protect herself from further pain, she opened that letter. She drove to that prison. She sat across from the man who had shattered her world and listened to what he had to say. That moment, that choice to face what she feared rather than avoid it, was perhaps the most pivotal in her entire story. Because without it, nothing that followed would have been possible. The centers would never have been built. Hundreds of young lives would never have been transformed. Darius would never have discovered his architectural talent. Olivia would never have found her true calling. All because one woman found the courage to open a letter she could have justifiably thrown away. I wonder how many of us avoid such moments in our own lives. How many letters remain unopened, conversations unspoken, truths unexplored because we fear the pain they might bring. How many possibilities never materialize because we choose the safety of our established narratives over the uncertainty of deeper understanding. The truth is, healing rarely comes from avoiding what hurts. Transformation rarely emerges from comfortable certainties. The most meaningful growth often begins in the moments we'd most like to avoid, when we face what frightens us, when we question what we thought we knew, when we allow complexity to challenge our simplistic stories. Eliza Morgan didn't just fulfill Grant Prescott's last wish. She honored her own capacity for growth by being willing to see beyond her pain to the more complicated truth that lay beneath it. Not to excuse what had happened, but to understand it more fully. And in that understanding, she found not just purpose, but a kind of freedom. Freedom from the limitations of a single story. Freedom to create something new from what had been broken. Perhaps that's the final lesson of this remarkable journey. That our greatest limitations aren't the wounds we've suffered or the mistakes we've made, but the stories we tell ourselves about them. The narratives that keep us locked in anger or shame, that prevent us from seeing the possibilities that exist beyond our pain. Grant Prescott's last wish opened the door to a new story, not just for him, but for Eliza, for Olivia, for Darius, and for hundreds of young people who would find homes in the centers that bore his name. A story not of perfect redemption, but of meaningful contribution, not of erased mistakes, but of transformed purpose. And isn't that, in the end, what most of us hope for? Not to undo what can't be undone, but to create meaning from it. Not to be defined by our worst moments, but to build something valuable from their lessons. As we part ways, I leave you with this question. What letter in your life remains unopened? What conversation have you avoided? What truth have you feared to face? And what possibilities might await if you found the courage to engage with them? The most beautiful buildings often begin with the most challenging sights. The most meaningful legacies often emerge from the most painful failures. And the most transformative journeys often start with a single step toward what we most fear to face. Eliza Morgan took that step. And in doing so, she didn't just fulfill Grant Prescott's last wish. She discovered her own capacity for transformation, for purpose, for a life richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined in the aftermath of betrayal. May we all find such courage. May we all discover such purpose. And may we all learn to build something beautiful from what once broke our hearts. If this story has touched you, please subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles for more explorations of the human heart's capacity for both devastating pain and remarkable resilience. Like this video if it moved you, share it with someone who needs its message, and comment below with your own story of courage and transformation. This is Mr. Whitman, signing off with gratitude for your time and attention. Until we meet again, may you find the courage to open the letters that frighten you and discover the new stories waiting to be written on the other side. Continue. Claude 37 sonnet 20 250 219. The following morning, Eliza made an unscheduled visit to the cemetery where Grant was buried. She hadn't been there in years, preferring to honor his memory through the living legacy of the centers rather than at a gravesite. The simple headstone bore only his name, birth, and death dates, and the words he had chosen himself: "Judge me not by my mistakes, but by what they taught me." Eliza placed a small architectural model on the grave, a perfect miniature of all 7 Prescott Morgan centers, crafted by Darius as a gift for the foundation's 10th anniversary. The model gleamed in the morning sunlight, its tiny windows reflecting the sky above. "I met Klein yesterday," she said aloud, feeling only slightly self-conscious about speaking to a headstone. He knew Grant, about Mason, about the threats. He knew, and he prosecuted you anyway. A gentle breeze stirred the cemetery's trees, sending a shower of autumn leaves spiraling to the ground. They settled around the grave in a tapestry of gold and crimson, nature's own tribute to the cycle of endings and beginnings. "I was angry at first," Eliza continued, thinking about what might have been different. "But then I realized something. If he had shown mercy, if you had received a lighter sentence, would any of this exist?" She gestured toward the miniature centers. "Would I have found this purpose? Would hundreds of young people have found homes in buildings that bear your design influence? Would Darius be an architect? Would Olivia have left academia to run the foundation?" The questions hung in the air, unanswerable yet profound. The path that had led her here was winding and painful, marked by betrayal and loss. Yet it had also been transformative, leading to a life of meaning and impact she might never have discovered otherwise. The truth is, we can never know what might have been. We can only work with what is. And what is something I'm proud of. Something I think you would be proud of too. As Eliza stood to leave, she felt a sense of completion, not the neat resolution of fiction, but the complex peace that comes from embracing the full truth of a journey, including its painful detours and unexpected gifts. That evening, Eliza hosted a small dinner at her home for the foundation's core team. Around her table sat Olivia, Darius, and his fiancée, and 3 other key staff members who had been with the foundation since its early days. As they shared a meal and discussed plans for the foundation's future, Eliza found herself studying these people who had become her chosen family. None of them would be in her life if not for Grant's crimes and his final acts of restitution. The realization was both strange and profound, how the worst chapter of her life had ultimately led to this moment of connection and purpose. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, raising her glass, "to unexpected journeys and the courage to follow them wherever they lead." "To unexpected journeys," they echoed, glasses clinking. Later, after her guests had departed, Eliza sat in her study reviewing applications for the foundation's newest initiative, a program to help former residents start their own businesses. The idea had come from Darius, who remembered his own struggle to secure startup funding for his architectural practice despite his education and talent. A small wooden box sat open on her desk, Grant's final gift, which had become a repository for meaningful mementos over the years. Beside it lay Klein's business card, which he had pressed into her hand before they parted. "If you ever want to discuss the case further," he had said, "while I still have time." Eliza picked up the card, considering. There were questions she still wanted answered, details about the investigation, about what Klein had known and when. Part of her wanted to leave the past buried, to focus solely on the Foundation's future, but another part recognized that understanding the full truth, however painful, had always been central to her healing process. She reached for her phone and dialed the number. "Mr. Klein, this is Eliza Morgan. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I have some questions, if you're willing to talk." The conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours. Klein shared details of the investigation that had never been made public, how close they had come to arresting the men threatening Mason, how political pressure had pushed for Grant's prosecution, regardless of mitigating circumstances, how Klein's own ambition had blinded him to the nuances of the case. "I've often wondered," Eliza said toward the end of their conversation, "what Grant would have done if he had lived, if he had served his sentence and been released. Based on what I've learned about him since," Klein replied thoughtfully, "I suspect he would have done exactly what you've done, tried to create meaning from his mistakes, though perhaps not as successfully." The observation startled Eliza. She had never considered that she might have accomplished more with Grant's legacy than he himself would have. "Thank you for your honesty," she said finally. "It can't have been easy to acknowledge your role in all this." "Easier than living with the silence," Klein responded. "Your husband wasn't the only one seeking redemption at the end of his life." After hanging up, Eliza sat in the quiet of her study, absorbing all she had learned. The full story of Grant's case, with its political pressures, prosecutorial ambition, and institutional failures, was more complex than she had imagined. Yet the essential truth remained unchanged. Grant had made terrible choices that hurt people, regardless of the pressures he faced. What had changed was her understanding of how systems legal, financial, political, could compound individual failures, creating consequences far beyond what any single person intended. This insight would inform the Foundation's work going forward. Beyond helping individual young adults transition to independence, they needed to address the systemic barriers that made such transitions unnecessarily difficult. The personal had always been political, but now Eliza saw more clearly how the Foundation could operate at both levels. 15 years to the day after Grant's death, Eliza stood before the gathered staff, residents, and alumni of all 7 Prescott Morgan centers. The occasion was the groundbreaking for the Foundation's most ambitious project yet, a comprehensive campus that would include not just transitional housing, but educational facilities, healthcare services, job training programs, and affordable permanent housing for program graduates. 15 years ago today, Eliza began, a man died believing his life had been defined by his worst mistakes. What he couldn't see was how those mistakes would become the catalyst for something transformative. She gestured to the assembled crowd, hundreds of young people whose lives had been touched by the centers, many now successful professionals returning to support the next generation. "Look around you. This is what redemption looks like. Not a single act of atonement, but an ongoing commitment to creating good from what was broken." As she spoke, Eliza caught sight of Darius standing near the front, his arm around his fiancée, his expression reflecting the pride of someone who had not just benefited from the Foundation's work but had become essential to its evolution. The campus we break ground on today represents the next phase of our journey. It acknowledges that transformation isn't just personal, it's communal. It requires not just individual change, but systemic support. After the ceremony, as attendees explored the architectural models and site plans displayed under a large tent, Eliza found herself standing beside Olivia, watching the activity with shared satisfaction. "Grant would hardly recognize what his last wish has become," Olivia observed. "I think he would," Eliza countered softly. "Not the specifics perhaps, but the essence, creating something meaningful from failure, offering others the second chances he ran out of time to fully embrace himself." "You've never remarried," Olivia noted, changing the subject with the directness that characterized their relationship. "In 15 years, I've never even seen you date seriously." Eliza smiled, unsurprised by the observation. "The Foundation became my focus. These young people became my family." "That's the public answer," Olivia replied. "What's the real one?" Eliza considered the question thoughtfully. "I think I needed to complete this journey with Grant first. to understand fully what happened between us, what was lost and what was gained, to make peace not just with his betrayal, but with the complex truth of our shared story. And now, Olivia pressed gently, now, Eliza acknowledged, I might be ready for a new chapter. As if on cue, a distinguished man approached them, Dr. Adrian Lockwood, the university's Dean of Architecture, who had been instrumental in establishing collaborative programs between the foundation and the school. Eliza, Olivia, he greeted them warmly. Remarkable presentation today. The new campus design is visionary. We had excellent architectural guidance, Eliza replied with a smile. She had worked closely with Adrian over the past year, developing the campus concept. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved to include coffee meetings that extended beyond work discussions and conversations that touched on personal histories and future hopes. I was wondering, Adrian said, his tone shifting slightly, if you might be free for dinner this evening to celebrate the successful groundbreaking? Olivia excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving Eliza and Adrian alone. Dinner would be lovely, Eliza replied, feeling a flutter of anticipation she hadn't experienced in years. Later that night, after a dinner that had stretched for hours as conversation flowed effortlessly between them, Eliza stood on her porch, saying goodnight to Adrian. I've enjoyed working with you this past year, he said, his expression earnest in the soft porch light. But I've enjoyed getting to know you even more. So have I, Eliza admitted. I understand the foundation is your priority, Adrian continued, and I respect the importance of what you've built. I'm not asking for that to change. What are you asking for? Eliza inquired softly. A chance to see where this might lead, he replied simply. At whatever pace feels right to you. As Eliza considered his words, she realized she was standing at another threshold, not just professionally with the new campus project, but personally as well. The journey that had begun with Grant's betrayal and continued through his death and the foundation's creation had brought her to this moment, ready, perhaps, to begin a new story that honored but was not defined by the past. I'd like that, she said finally. After Adrian left, Eliza sat for a long time on her porch swing, contemplating the day's events and the unexpected turn her evening had taken. 15 years ago, she could never have imagined the path her life would follow, the pain that would become purpose, the betrayal that would lead to creation, the ending that would become a beginning. Grant's last wish had been for redemption, a chance to create meaning from his mistakes. What had emerged was something far more profound. Not just redemption for one man's failures, but transformation for hundreds of lives, including her own. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the campus project to oversee, policy initiatives to advance, young lives to support, and now, perhaps, a personal journey to explore alongside her professional one. The future, like the architectural plans for the new campus, existed first as possibility, a vision of what might be, waiting to be brought into reality through intention, effort, and courage. Eliza smiled as she rose to enter her home. Whatever came next, she would face it with the wisdom hard-won from everything that had come before, the understanding that from our deepest wounds can come our greatest gifts, and that the most meaningful legacies often begin with a single wish for something better than what was lost. My friends, as we come to the end of this remarkable journey with Eliza Morgan, I hope you found something that resonates with your own life. Perhaps you've faced betrayal, or made mistakes that seemed beyond redemption. Maybe you've struggled to rebuild after loss, or wondered if your pain could ever transform into purpose. The truth is, we all carry wounds. We all face moments when the future we imagined crumbles before our eyes. But Eliza's story reminds us that what matters most isn't what breaks us, it's what we choose to build from the broken pieces. Grant Prescott's last wish wasn't simply for forgiveness. It was for the chance to create meaning from his failures to ensure that his life, despite its catastrophic mistakes, might somehow contribute to something good. In fulfilling that wish, Eliza didn't just honor Grant's redemptive journey, she discovered her own path to healing and purpose. The Prescott Morgan Centers stand as testament to a profound truth, that our darkest moments don't have to define us. That with courage, vision, and the willingness to face difficult truths, we can transform our deepest wounds into our most meaningful contributions. And perhaps most importantly, Eliza's story reminds us that forgiveness isn't always what we imagine it to be. Sometimes, It's not about forgetting or excusing harm. Sometimes, it's about acknowledging the full, complex truth of our shared humanity and then choosing to build something new from that understanding. As I reflect on this story, I'm reminded of something my grandmother used to say. The most beautiful gardens often grow in soil that has known the deepest pain. Eliza Morgan's garden, the 7 centers that now nurture hundreds of young lives, grew from soil that had been scorched by betrayal, watered with tears of grief, and ultimately enriched by the courage to see beyond simple narratives of guilt and innocence. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the transformation of Grant's legacy, but Eliza's willingness to continually re-examine her understanding of truth. When faced with new information, whether Grant's deathbed confession, Olivia's appearance, or Klein's revelation, she didn't cling to comfortable certainties. Instead, she allowed her perspective to evolve, recognizing that truth is rarely simple and redemption never complete. This is the lesson I hope you'll take with you today, that life's most meaningful journeys often begin with a single step taken in the aftermath of our greatest losses. That purpose can emerge from pain, connection from isolation, and hope from despair if we have the courage to keep building, even when the original blueprints of our lives have been destroyed. Grant Prescott's last wish became the foundation for something far greater than he could have imagined. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because Eliza chose to create meaning from what had broken her. In doing so, she didn't just fulfill his wish, she discovered her own capacity for transformation. And isn't that, ultimately, what we're all seeking? Not perfect justice or fairy tale endings, but the ability to write new chapters even after the most devastating plot twists. To find purpose that transcends our pain. To create legacies that outlast our mistakes. If this story has touched something in you, if you found yourself reflecting on your own journey of loss and rebuilding, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What broken dreams in your life might become foundations for something new? What pain might be transformed into purpose? And if you know someone who's standing in the rubble of what once was, someone who needs to be reminded that beauty can rise from ashes, please share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can offer each other is the reminder that our stories aren't over, that what feels like an ending might actually be the beginning of something we couldn't have imagined. Before you go, take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles if you haven't already. Each week, we explore stories that remind us of our shared humanity, our capacity for both terrible mistakes and extraordinary redemption. Like this video if it moved you, and comment below with the moment that resonated most deeply. Until next time, my friends, remember that the most enduring structures are often built on the foundations of what once fell apart, and the most meaningful wishes aren't for what might have been, but for what still might be. This is Mr. Whitman, wishing you the courage to keep building even when the plans have changed.